Whenever I sing that song, I'm reminded of a kind of a tender moment between my dad and my brother. My brother was dying of cancer, and I remember my dad was sitting with him, and my dad said to my brother, "If you get to heaven before I do, save a place on the bus for me." And I always thought about that. And that, of course, that happened. And I always think about that when I sing that song. You know, this morning the sunrise was exceptional. And every day that the sun rises, it just reminds me of the sun, the S-O-N sun that rises in our hearts every day. And the sunrise is an invitation to hope and to have the courage to get through at least one more day. So I came into church and I lit the candles a little early. I listened to some music and I read the Serenity Prayer again, which I read yesterday in my thought for the day. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Well, I said that yesterday, and one of the guys who listens to my thought for the day emailed me. And he said, "Don, would you read that thing every day?" He said, "I'm in my room at assisted living. I can't leave my room. I can't get to my AA meeting, so I need something to hold on to." And those words in the Serenity Prayer is what he holds on to every day because he just can't get out. And he needs to accept those things that he can't change and the wisdom to know the difference. So I'm sitting in here staring at all the flowers, and I'm thinking, you know, this is kind of an interesting church. I'm not sure it's always a good church, but it's an interesting church because we run into some interesting people, and a lot of them are not church people. So I had 2 funerals this weekend in the church for guys who didn't go to church. And the reason we can do that is because of you. Because when you support the church, those of you that are here and out there, that means the door can be open to anybody who walks in. Well, the one guy from Friday, Roy, he didn't come to church, even though his daughter does. But for some reason, he would listen to the thought for the day, and he has a real soft spot for Heartland. He's never been to Heartland. He's never been to church, but he has this soft spot. So even in his sickest moments, when his daughter would visit him, he'd take out some cash and give it to his daughter and say, "Make sure you give this to the church, because any church that can support a place like Heartland has got to be a good place." And so in a way, he belonged here. The other guy was at the service I had yesterday. And they obviously have a good relationship with florists in the area. And he's a Vietnam Marine veteran, a very proud one, but he's kind of a wedding, christening, funeral guy. And so when I was up here talking about him, I pointed to his ashes right here on the altar, and I said, "Ken has spent more time in the church today than he has in the last 10 years. That's just the way it is. But you see, the door is open, and we celebrate his spirit. And he has such a soft spot for the church because he's a very proud veteran. And he knows how we feel about veterans and men and women in uniform and our service people. And so one of my colleagues was talking to me about our church being open, and he says, "Now, Don, you don't do church weddings and church funerals for non-members, do you?" And I said, "What? Say that again. You don't do weddings and funerals for non-members." And I said, "Why are we here?" And I'm thinking of the gospel lesson for this morning. You know, in those 10 verses that you read, Jesus was all over the place. He began his day by healing one of his disciples' mother-in-laws. And then he went out on a hill, and people came to him to be cured and to be healed, and he cast out demons. And then the next day, he and the disciples traveled to Galilee, where he taught and cured and cast out demons. And I don't see in those 10 verses any membership requirements for being in Jesus' presence. He didn't separate the worthy from the non-worthy, the Pharisee from the Gentile. All he did was reach out and heal those who needed a dose of his Father's presence. And isn't that what we are supposed to do? Now, we can't be Jesus. And our imperfections and our humanity, well, we just can't do it. By my imperfections and my inhumanity. But together, we are the church. And we're called to do Jesus' work. He was an itinerant preacher. He went all over the place to all kinds of people. And in our own human and imperfect way, that's what we're called to do as the church today. You know, to all the saints and sinners out there, of which all of us are one of them, there's lots of burdens out there. And there's lots of guilt out there. And the last thing you need is for the church to pile it on some more. This needs to be a place of grace and goodness and refreshment. The funeral was over, and the church was empty, and I saw the petals all over the floor. I looked at the cross and the banners and the words and the flowers, and I was just thinking to myself, do you ever get tired of fighting? I mean, sometimes we have to fight, especially the last 10, 11 months, for the simplest things. I mean, sure, we have fights in our own family. Sometimes you have to fight to get paid. My gosh, you got to fight to get the vaccine. You got to fight the snow. You got to fight the cold. Sometimes you got to fight to see your doctor. I called for a checkup, and he said, "What's your first opening?" He says, "Next September." I may not be alive next September. Not to mention our battle with the COVID and the pandemic. And sometimes we get a little depressed and a little frustrated, and we even have to fight with ourselves. But there's something we don't have to fight. We don't have to fight God's grace. And we sure don't have to fight the church. As you know, it's easy to get an appointment to come here on Sunday morning. And the sunrise is always a reminder that some things in life are free of charge, and yet they have a richness that money cannot buy. It's like my buddy who's cooped up in his room. I need something to hold on to get me through the day. And we all need something to hold on to. And we don't have to fight for it. All we have to do is accept it. And that's the miracle. If you're able to, please rise for the creed.